Well, over the last couple of weeks in the church, we've been talking about the cross. St. Paul talked about it, Jesus talked about it. Jesus kept talking about being rejected, being tortured, being murdered. And we've talked about violence. We've talked about the different ways that God had to come and seek peace in the midst of human violence. And we get a little picture of that and really the seeds of that in the reading from Numbers that Paul read. It said a rabble was struggling with strong desires, strong cravings. Now, whenever the Old Testament describes you as a rabble, that's usually not good. It means you're sort of a mixed group who's lost their way and you're just sort of fixated on yourselves. And you're fixated on what you want and how you want it right now. And it said they had a strong craving. And it gets to the problem of human desire. This is why, I've told you this 10 times, but I'll tell you now the 11th time. This is why the Lutherans break out the 10 Commandments, and it's not just us, it's the older way of counting them, to include 2 covenanting commandments. A lot of Protestants, they break out idolatry because they think idolatry is the biggest problem. But the Lutherans and before them, the medieval Western Christians said, well, I guess so, but idolatry is really a function of our desiring, and so our coveting, turning our eyes to the wrong things, wanting our neighbor's possessions, wanting our neighbor's people is going to give us a lot of trouble. And so at the heart of this, and we might even say at the root of human violence, which will finally lead us to the cross, is the problem of desire. And it said the rabble was in the wilderness with a strong craving. And they're not just there going, I could really use a hamburger tonight. I wish we'd, do we have any burgers in the freezer? These are people who are driven by a kind of compulsion. And we know, this is so closely connected with our experience of addiction. People who are compelled by a craving, almost a physiological longing for, it could be food, like in this reading, it could be alcohol, drugs, sex, gambling, money, whatever it is, the different ways that humans start to desire, and our entire being is dedicated toward this. And this is what we have. And it says they're in the wilderness crying. They've been out for 2 years now. That's where we're at in the lineage of the Sinai journey. They've been set, these are the people who had been slaves. They've been set free. They had the 10 Commandments at Mount Sinai. They did the golden calf. They had the 10 Commandments again. And now just a few minutes later, they're crying. They're literally out there crying. It's like, when you go to a child and they're crying and you go, oh my gosh, are you hurt? And then you find out, no, someone touched my stuff and now I can't use it, And you go, what? So Moses is going, oh my gosh, everyone's crying, what happened? Oh, we really need some cucumbers, some Egyptian cucumbers and some fish and onions. And at least from archaeological evidence, it looks like, Egyptian slaves mostly ate onions, so you can imagine how that went. Kind of a, but they talk about all the stuff they ate. There's a little bit of fanciful remembering and also aspirational desire, to just go to Egypt and eat all of this stuff, never mind the dehumanizing experience of the murderous slavery that they were under. But now they've been set free by God. They have a covenant with God. God is guiding them toward a good future, and all they can think about are themselves and their desires. This rabble with a strong craving, and this is the problem of human desire, and it will be intimately connected to the problem of the cross, and it will be intimately connected to the gift of the resurrection and the giving of the Holy Spirit. Now, it ties to a question that each of us should ask ourselves, and it's a question that we rarely ask anymore, at least in our society and the world in which we live, which is, when is it enough? When have you had enough? When have you eaten enough? When do you have enough money? When do you have enough clothes? When do you have enough possessions? When do you have enough prestige? And for some people, you realize it's never enough. Sort of the bottomless hole of our appetite. You finally you go, oh my gosh, if I could just get this, then I'll be happy. And if I could just get this house, and then you get it and you go, well, we're ready to upgrade. You're already on to the next thing, ready for the next thing. And I'm not saying being ambitious is bad, but there's a sense of uneasiness where we never have enough. And this is part of the problem of the strong craving, is they'll never have enough. And it's a question that we each need to ask, when will we have enough? When will our possessions be enough for us? When will God be enough for us? Because at the root of it is that spiritual problem that they're saying, God cannot touch my craving. I'm going to have to fill it with cucumbers and onions and Egyptian fish. This is the problem. It's actually the problem that Moses has, but Moses has it on the other side where he goes, I've had enough of them. And they're actually too much for me. I've had too much of them. And they go, you can't have too much of a good thing. And he goes, I don't know if I'd call you a good thing. He goes, I've had enough. I mean, here's God listening to Moses complain. I mean, Moses' complaint is so bitter. God, I'm not, it's like parents fighting going, well, your son just crashed the car. And you go, why is he my son all of a sudden? That's kind of the same. Your people did this again, God. And I didn't. And no, Moses said that I didn't give birth to them. I didn't pick them up. I didn't want them. They're not my people. Why are you? And you'll remember there's even a point where God gets so frustrated with the Israelites in the Old Testament that he tells one of the prophets, Hosea, he says, you're going to name your child not my people. Because even God's going to go, you are not my people right now. I'm very upset with you. You are not my people. And this is Moses' complaint. And you'll notice that there were several sections of Numbers that were excised out of the text, so we jumped a couple times. And those are all the times where God goes, oh, you don't have enough food? I'll give you food. How about bread every day? And then, oh, well, now we want meat. Oh, you want meat? God even says, it's going to be coming out of your ears. There's going to be so much meat. And Moses goes, well, how are you going to do that? There's no butchers near here, no carniceria. And God goes, oh, I'll take care of that. There's that lovely phrase, and it doesn't really get translated. I mean, they translate it, but it's a lovely phrase where it says, and the Lord was very angry, and Moses was upset, or something like that. But you need to understand the Hebrew phrase for God being angry is, and it burned in the Lord's nostrils. The Lord's nostrils burned. So it says he's angry, but it has a much richer meaning than just sort of someone being angry. I remember once when I was a kid, we had a first aid kit, and we'd been watching old movies. And, they'd always, whenever people would faint, they'd give them smelling salts. You remember? And they had smelling salts in this first aid kit. And I said, oh, I'm going to try that like an old movie. I didn't even know what it was. I just said ammonia on it. And I go, well, how bad can that smell? So I break it, and my whole face just started on fire. Everything was in my nostrils, especially my sign, everything was on fire. And it's like, well, no wonder it wakes you up. It's like burning the inside of your face. This is what God is saying here. It's like God is listening to these complaints. God is hearing them cry, and they're not crying because they're not following the covenant and they're not walking where God wants them to go. And so it just burns the nose of God. You don't think about God's nostrils very often, but you should today. It just burns, because we even hear that from St. Paul, the aroma of Christ, what we smell like before God. And it's like, oh, you're like smelling salts. You're just burning the face of God today. We might imagine on the cross, Jesus' nose was burning as he considered what we had just done to him. Now, the question is, so what do we do when it's not enough for the people, and when people are too much, then what's the answer? And this actually, Moses' conundrum actually ties to something else I just wanted to mention briefly, which is I was sitting with a family in the church yesterday. I got called over by some family members because they're struggling with caregiving. Because the person's having some health problems, and they just go, we don't know what to do, And so we talk through some of the options they have, and working with CCN, or working with this group, or working with that group. And probably that's the fifth or sixth conversation in the last few months about caregiving for people in our church. And it's just a reminder that it can be such a hardship for people. I don't have to tell you, because I think you already know. It can be a real hardship for people to figure out what is the best way we can do this without kind of losing ourselves in the midst. And that's Moses' problem as a caregiver when he goes, God, I can't do that. I need some help. And that's where we get, what is God's answer going to be? And God goes, oh, I have an answer for that. And it's the very opposite of the mindset of the desire of the people, which is there's not going to be enough. I have to get mine. When I get mine, I need to get more, and I need to corner the market, and I need to have an abundance of resources so I can just access them. God goes, okay, well, Moses, I'm going to get you some help, but I'm going to take what you have, and I'm going to give it to other people. Now, generally, that would be a threat. I'm going to take what you have and redistribute it to other people. Well, that means if we had 100, well, no, I'm only going to get 25, you're going to get 25, 25, and 25. It's a diminishing and a spreading out because we have a scarce amount of resources. And God goes, no, we're not going to do that. I'm going to give 100% of what you have to this next person and to this next person, actually to 70 people. And what he's giving is the Spirit. It's this very famous story. And the Spirit is even given to those who aren't seen to be part of the circle of receiving the Spirit, Eldad and Medad. These two Hebrews who are out in the camp, and they get the same gift. They start prophesying too. And people go, whoa, 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 not you. That's not for you. And then Moses goes, why do you care? You should be happy. They got the same gift I got. You should be happy. And they go, well, there's not going to be enough of it to go around. It's a scarce resource. And then God goes, no, it's not. It's not a scarce resource. And then people will go, well, what good is it then? If it's not a scarce resource, I want the rarity. I need something rare. Well, it's rare to the degree that it's precious, but it's not rare to the degree that it's limited, like everything else that you're worried about. And God does that with the bread. God does that with the quail. It's the same thing Jesus says to John when he says, why are you stopping people? We just watched someone set someone free from a demon in your name, and we told him to stop. He didn't have the proper credentials. He had not been credentialed by the Discipleship Association of Galilee, and so he said this was not a valid exorcism. And Jesus goes, what are you talking about? If they have my Spirit, let them do my... You're only going to do my work if you have my Spirit. And what we get is the possibility of multiplication without diminishment. It's the same thing when Jesus takes the food and splits it into multiple pieces. It multiplies without diminishing, which means the impact is multiplied as well. And this is what he means when he says, you all are going to be salted with fire. And then he talks about salt, but he could talk about fire. He literally means God is going to pour out fire on us, because fire is that same element that it multiplies without being diminished. So if we take a candle, like at Christmas Eve and we're lighting all the candles, or we start a fire and it burns and we put it somewhere else and it burns, it doesn't take fire from this spot, now you have two fires. And so God is sprinkling the church with fire so that we can deal with the problem of desire that leads to violence, and we can also deal with a sense of, God, I can't do this. I can't do the caregiving. I can't do the caring. There's too much. These people are so needy. What are we supposed to do with that? And that can be one way that we burn out in our social ministries, a way we burn out when we're dealing with people who are complicated and who are homeless. We just go, there's just not enough for us. We can't do this. What will your answer be, God? And the answer will be Spirit. And the answer will be fire. And you'll notice when Jesus gives us this language of people cutting off their hands and their eyes and stuff, like when they opened the new City of Hope campus on Main Street in Yorktown, someone in the city council got up and he said, I found out I had prostate cancer, and I said, rip it out. Just take it out. I don't want to mess with chemotherapy and radiation. Just take it out. And the people all went, oh, good for him. No one went, oh, that's weird. Why would you take it out? Well, because it was filled with cancer. That's why he took it out. And oftentimes when people read these texts from Jesus about cutting off your hand and taking out your eye, they go, well, that sounds sort of masochistic or, just brutal. That's so brutal. Well, unless you think the problem of sin is serious enough to kill you, like cancer, then you won't think it's a problem to take it out. But if you think this is poison, this is death inside of me, let's take it out. Let's take out the parts that aren't going to bring me to life. You understand why Jesus speaks in this stark way. You understand the problem of the violence of numbers. You understand why Jesus says, don't just wait to murder, pull out the seed while it's anger. Don't just wait to commit adultery, pull out the seed when it's lust. Start early. It's a lot easier to weed the garden than to get out the chainsaw and cut down the whole tree. And this is what Jesus is encouraging us to live in this intentional way and to recognize how it is that we can live by the Spirit and not by the whirlpool of our desires. That final note, which is printed on the front of your bulletin today, I'm glad it's on the piano so I can see that. If salt has lost its saltiness, how can we season it? This essential part of salt. Salt is not separated from its taste. The saltiness is the thing. It's essential to the thing. And when we think about the essential thing of the church, it is not that we gather the right people who are the smartest or the richest or the most talented or the most interesting or who can sing the best or do the work or cook the best or whatever. We are a community of people who have been salted by fire, meaning in a world where people feel like there's not enough, where people are competing for resources, where people feel overwhelmed by the needs of others, God has given us the same Spirit. And it is the Spirit after resurrection, and it is what allows the church to be the church. And so we have been salted by fire, and it is a gift that multiplies and is shared and grows, and it is a light in the growing darkness. Amen.